Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that we live in arguably one of the most corrupt countries on earth. I'm sure there's countries that beat South Africa, but considering the fact that South Africa has a world class economy and arguably the most advanced economy on the African continent, it is truly sad when you see just how brazen a lot of the corruption in South Africa is. This morning, I think, along with most South Africans, many of us watched on in horror as the Daily Maverick released a video detailing what can only be described as corruption at the highest levels. And once again, corruption involving the government and government employees. Now, I mean, how do I even explain this? In South Africa, our government is basically like a leaking sieve. It's like a bucket with no bottom. The money goes in and then the money just spills everywhere. Most of the time, we don't even know where most of that money is going. In fact, in this very video, they admit that the IDT, which is the main player here, because the IDT takes money from the Department of Public Spending and then invests it into also public works, but spending more aptly probably describes them, but then spends that money investing in all sorts of different programs that the government sort of streamlines or wants to enact. The problem, of course, is that most of these industries, and this is not the only one, the IDT is one of many of these investment arms of the government. There's so many of them that it's almost impossible for even the proper journalists in the country to investigate all of these different arms and different investment arms of the government to kind of figure out, listen here, what the hell are we actually doing? In this particular case, though, you have this woman here, Tebogo Malaka, who was the CEO of IDT. And then suddenly, just some weird stuff started to happen. So, as this journalist, let me just make sure about his name, Pieter-Louis Myburgh. As Pieter-Louis Myburgh started looking into Tebogo Malaka, he started noticing some very interesting stuff. She suddenly became super rich, and we're not talking bank loan rich. We're talking millions of rands worth of properties in cash rich. The issue, they couldn't figure out where the cash was actually coming from. And then the more they started looking into it, the more they started realizing that the IDT continuously gets these contractors to do business with the IDT, and these contractors continuously seem to show up at her properties, building massive homes. The same contractors seem to be getting all of these contracts over and over again. Now, the CEO, Mrs. Malaka, has been suspended from the IDT over an 836 million rand oxygen plants scandal. Now, this scandal we did actually cover a few days ago, where they decided to give the contract to build these oxygen plants next to hospitals to a company that has never built a single thing in their entire lives. They have no experience when it comes to building anything, let alone oxygen plants, right? The company doesn't seem to have anyone really working even for it. It's just 836 million given to the company. Then when the media started to ask questions, I'm like, hey, what the hell is this actually all about? Suddenly the contract was sort of removed, no longer mentioned. And then the board suspended Mrs. Malaka, awaiting further investigation. Now, this is where we get to the Daily Maverick's investigation into Malaka. Now, the Daily Maverick does say that they have another video that's coming out where they'll actually be breaking everything, right? So, actually, an article where they'll be breaking the entire story, how Mrs. Malaka was involved in all of the corruption that goes over the entire span of her career. But okay, so as Pieter-Louis Myburgh, as he started looking into this particular scandal, because this is the scandal that kicked off everything, Mrs. Malaka and the spokesperson for the IDT decided to reach out to him and set up a meeting. He describes during this video how the preamble to the meeting, the phone call, made him feel very suspicious. And so he went to his editors, they went to their lawyers and so on, and they got everything on record, making sure that they have all of their statements, because they knew that something strange was going to happen. So they had cameras set up at the table to record the entire first meeting, because the first meeting would just be between the spokesperson and the journalist, not Mrs. Malaka as well, but that would come later. In this first meeting, the spokesperson offered Pieter-Louis money, an undisclosed, I think, amount of money, because the 60,000 that they offered him later, that comes when he finally meets with Mrs. Malaka. But they handed him an envelope full of cash, basically saying, "Hey, we want you to meet with Mrs. Malaka." Also setting up in this that if he decides to work with them. Now, the first meeting, by the way, Mrs. Malaka is still working for the IDT. She's still the CEO of the IDT. And the spokesperson effectively tells the journalist, Pieter-Louis, that if you decide to work with us, you can get your own contract. You can set up your own contractors, maybe get your mom, your dad, or some of your cousins to set up companies. They can then contract for the IDT, and we'll give them the contracts, and you can get super rich, right? Which is, of course, in South Africa, the legal way of stealing money. Because when you steal money, just taking the money and putting it in your bank account, that's easily traceable. However, when you have family members that set up these shell companies that then just rob the public purse, it's very difficult to track. And as you can see here, this has probably been happening over the course of many, many decades, many, many years. We're only now finding out about it because finally one of the journalists started to feel like, hey, maybe we should start looking into the IDT. And this didn't even just happen because they had a hunch. It's more that people who work for the IDT decided to contact Daily Maverick and Pieter-Louis specifically and be like, hey, you guys should start looking into what's happening here. Something weird is going on at our department, proving that there are some good people who are working at government who can see that stuff isn't necessarily how it should be. But you can just ask yourself how many millions of rands are leaving South Africa's government every single day under shadowy circumstances. But okay, so after the original meet, he goes back, he does a bunch of interviews with lawyers and so on, making sure that their side of the story, because they decide they're going to string them along. They want to see how far this actually goes. Over the course of the next few months, or weeks actually, the spokesperson sends Pieter-Louis a bunch of projects, tenders that's coming through, telling him that he should suggest some contractors that they might want to work with and maybe might want to build some stuff in Cape Town. Finally, the meeting happens between Tebogo Malaka and Pieter-Louis Myburgh. At this meeting, Malaka will tell her spokesperson to leave the table. And during this time, she actually conveys to Pieter-Louis that she just wants to put all of this behind her. She doesn't want him to write anymore about her particular house in Johannesburg, because she has a father and a mother and children, and they're all very stressed about this, and she's already been suspended over everything, so she just wants them to stop. And whatever he does, that's all that matters, that he stops writing this article. She never wants this article to come out, and he plays along. He's basically like, yeah, no problem. I can understand why you're so stressed, why this is such a stressful period of time for you. And then he calls back I don't know why this thing keeps falling off, but they call back the spokesperson. He sits down and he hands him this wad of cash over here. Inside, it's filled with 200 Rand notes, a massive stack, about 60,000. He does ask them on camera, how much did you bring? 60,000. He takes a photo just very casually. They obviously don't think too much of it because the fact that they don't think too much of it actually speaks volumes to me. It tells me that they're so used to everyone in their world covering their own asses. This person taking this picture makes sure that they now have some dirt on them. They have some dirt on them. So everyone's happy because everyone has dirt on everyone. And so together we can steal quite a lot. Because in all other situations, let me just point that out. If I were to sit down with someone and hand them a wad of cash and they start taking a picture, I'd be like, why are you taking a picture? Like, what are you trying to do here, right? They don't seem to do anything. He then informs them, hey, I'm not taking the money. Good luck to all of you. I will see you guys later. Now we are in a position where next week we should find out what happens next, right? How deep does the story actually go? Because as it turns out, it involves private contractors and prominent private businessmen who have made millions of rands on the public purse. This is South Africa. This is how it works. This is our government. We are continuously robbed blind in this country, and there's no way of stopping it because the government has created so many avenues through which it can steal money from the public. And as the ANC famously continuously says, the cadres must eat, you know? And a little bit of corruption is fine as long as everyone doesn't steal altogether. The issue is that corruption tends to not have any brakes. Once it starts, it picks up speed. And I think South Africa is at a point now where everyone just steals. And the economy can no longer really hold its own. It can no longer recover. There's less than 7 million taxpayers in this country left. 26 million people are living off of the government every single month here in South Africa. You have less than 1,000 companies paying more than 90% of corporate tax in this country. You have less than, as I already said, 7 million taxpayers paying all of the income tax. And in South Africa, nearly 40% of the entire GDP or budget of the government is made up of personal income tax, which is insane. That's not, I think it's 40%, it might actually be 60%. I haven't fact checked this in a while. I covered this a few weeks ago. Either 40 or 60%. Either way, even at 40%, that's insane, right? In most countries, you want that to be between maybe 10 and 20%. Most of your taxes should come from corporations paying the tax, not from people spending their own money to give back to the government, right? That's insanity. But that's where we are. And it's a sad state. It's a sad fact, but it is what it is, you know? Let me know in the comment section down below. How do you feel about all of this? What should happen to Ms. Tebogo Malaka? Should the government, to my mind, we should bring back the death penalty. And from how I feel, if you stole from people, if you stole from the public, you should get the death penalty. I don't see how going to jail is a good enough punishment for people who steal from the public, steal money that does not belong to them, money that they have a sworn duty to spend well. That's just my opinion. As always, if you like what I do, if you like the content that I present you with, please consider hitting the like button, hitting that subscribe button, and also leaving a comment because it does help out. Then to all of the patrons and the YouTube channel members, thank you so much for all of your support. It means the absolute world to me. To everyone that wants to support, just click the link in the description down below or hit the join button right below this video. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.